Hello, I'm Lowell. I love movies, and this is Lowell Loves Movies.
Let's watch a movie. Let's watch a movie. Absolutely.
If I were Disney and Pixar right now, the emotion I would be feeling right now is joy. And after 4 years or more of living with anxiety, boy, does it feel good. For those of you who don't know, Disney and Pixar's new movie, Inside Out 2, has become the first movie of 2024 to make $1 billion worldwide. It has also become the fastest animated movie to make $1 billion in just 19 days. That's less than 3 weeks in theaters. 19 days, and already it's $1 billion. If you had told me at the beginning of the year, I knew Inside Out 2 would be successful. I mean, obviously the first Inside Out is one of the best, most beloved Pixar movies, not just recently, but maybe ever. It left a huge impact on the culture. That movie came out 9 years ago, and people still use the term core memories. That's how big of an impact it had on us. And people have always wanted to see a sequel to Inside Out. I remember when Inside Out first came out on YouTube, there were already parody trailers of an Inside Out 2 where Riley goes through puberty, and those always got like millions of views on YouTube. So people have always been hungry for an Inside Out 2. I knew Inside Out 2 was going to be a hit, but I didn't think it was going to be this big of a hit. And I don't even know if Disney or Pixar thought it was going to be this big of a hit. This is huge. And what's crazy is 5 years ago, this wouldn't be as big of a deal. It would still be a big deal. Obviously, it would be a moment to pop out the champagne. But 5 years ago, this was just another Wednesday for Disney. In 2019, almost every movie they released made $1 billion. Captain Marvel, Avengers Endgame, the Aladdin remake, Toy Story 4, the Lion King remake, Spider-Man Far From Home, even though that was Sony, Frozen 2, Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. God, 2019, man, that was crazy. But this year and the last few years, Disney has not really been hitting that milestone lately. In fact, most of Hollywood hasn't really been hitting that milestone, especially Disney. The last time Disney had $1 billion movie was Spider-Man No Way Home in 2021. And again, that was really Sony. Disney and Sony both kind of shared the pie together. But this, Inside Out 2 making $1 billion, and in 19 days, that's impressive. That is amazing. And obviously everybody has different thoughts. There's people that are excited because they're happy for Pixar, and I'm excited for Pixar. I don't know about you, but for me, Pixar is not only my favorite animation studio, I think Pixar might be my favorite movie studio ever. Their best movies are among my list of my favorite movies of all time. And I absolutely loved Inside Out 2. I've seen it so many times, so I'm probably the reason it made $1 billion. So you're welcome, Pixar. And so yeah, the people are excited that Inside Out 2 is doing well, especially Pixar and Disney. Disney really needed a win, badly. However, just like anxiety in the movie, a lot of people are looking at all the bad possibilities of this, all the worst case scenarios. And obviously the main one is that Disney and Pixar is going to take the wrong lesson from this. And they're going to look at the numbers for Inside Out 2 and compare it to the box office numbers of their last few movies, like Elemental, and they're going to make the conclusion that, audiences don't want to see original movies anymore. Audiences just want to see sequels. Make Toy Story 5. And you know what? While we're at it, make Toy Story 6, Toy Story 7, Finding Nemo 3, Incredibles 3, Monsters Inc. 2, whatever. Like, people are worried that Pixar is just going to make nothing but sequels. And I can understand that. I mean, yeah, like I said, Disney hasn't had a great few years, and especially Pixar. I mean, there's a lot of factors. Obviously, the pandemic kind of turned a lot of people off from movie theaters for a while. I mean, I know it's been 4 years now. The pandemic's kind of, the pandemic, we're not really talking about the pandemic anymore. I mean, COVID is still out there. It's just, we're not really talking about it because a lot of us got vaccinated and stuff. But still, COVID is out there. And during COVID, Disney and basically every studio in Hollywood did this thing for a while where, in 2020, they released their movies that were supposed to be in theaters straight onto digital. Like they started doing that with Trolls World Tour. They did that with the Warner Brothers Scoob movie, Scooby-Doo. They did that with Wonder Woman 1984. They did that with Christopher Nolan's Tenet, and that pissed Christopher Nolan off, and it caused him and Warner Brothers to divorce, and Christopher Nolan started dating Universal, and that's how we got Barbenheimer. And that could be a separate video. It's a fascinating story. But yeah, so for a while, Hollywood released their movies straight on digital because for a while, people couldn't really go to movie theaters because of the pandemic. And then in 2021, when the vaccine started rolling out, a lot of people were taking the vaccine, but it still wasn't people still didn't feel 100% safe going to the movies. So in 2021, Disney tried this thing, and Warner Brothers also tried this, where they released their movies in theaters and on digital streaming at the same time. And obviously, Scarlett Johansson, it affected the Black Widow movie. Black Widow was released in theaters and on Disney Plus on the same day, and obviously Scarlett Johansson was pissed off because, for those of you who don't know, when a movie makes money at the box office, the money for the tickets goes to the actors. The theaters only get the money from the snacks. But if a movie is released in theaters and on streaming, well, then that means the actor takes a big cut off their paycheck. And, look, we can argue all day of celebrities being overpaid and being paid too much. I get that, but for me, it's not about the money, it's about the principle. But again, that's a separate video for another time. So the bottom line is that Pixar and Disney, they've been releasing their movies straight to streaming. Like in 2021, they released Luca straight to streaming. In 2022, they released Turning Red straight to streaming. And those movies actually did really well on Disney Plus. But they didn't release them in theaters. They were supposed to be theatrical releases. That's why in the movie Soul, at the end of the credits, Terry looks at the audience and goes, "Aye, movie's over, go home." But when it came on Disney Plus, I was thinking to myself, but I am home. Am I? So, so Pixar's been releasing their movies straight to streaming. But then, in June of 2022, they released Lightyear, which was a spinoff of Toy Story. It was a kind of an origin movie for Buzz Lightyear. It was like the real Buzz Lightyear, the Buzz Lightyear that the toy was based on, but it didn't take place in the Toy Story universe. It was so confusing. Like, and it didn't have Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear. It had Chris Evans as Buzz Lightyear, and it flopped hard, and let's be honest, it just wasn't that good of a movie. Why would you make Zurg into older Buzz Lightyear? Honestly. Anyways, I'm going off topic. So, and then last year they released Elemental, which was an original film. It was about elements living in a city together, and the element of fire falling in love with the element of water. And it had a terrible, terrible opening weekend. Like the worst opening weekend in Pixar history. And it opened on the same weekend as The Flash. But unlike The Flash, Elemental actually did have better legs, ironically, and managed to do better in the continuing weeks due to word of mouth. But still, even though Elemental did well, it didn't do as well as, Disney was hoping. But so I think if Disney's looking at the box office for Elemental, an original film that did pretty good but not great, and the box office for Inside Out 2, which is doing phenomenally well across the board, like everybody in Hollywood is just absolutely blown away by the success of this thing. Yeah, I guess it's hard not to reach the conclusion that Pixar might look at this and go, yeah, let's just make another Toy Story. I'm making this video not to do a box office analysis. I'm not really an expert on box office analysis. I'm not Dan Murrell. If you want to hear really good box office analysis, go watch Dan Murrell's show, Charts with Dan. But what I will say is that I am making this video because as a fan of Pixar, as a fan of movies, as a fan of Inside Out, I want Pixar and Disney to take the right lessons from this movie. Now, I don't know if I can change Disney's mind. I'm just one person. I'm just one guy in Southern California. But as somebody who loves Pixar and wants Pixar to succeed and wants Pixar to keep making great original movies, I am making this video to give a few reasons why I think Inside Out 2 is doing as well as it is, and what lessons I think Disney and Pixar should take from it. So, as I mentioned, I've seen Inside Out 2 many times, and I'm probably the reason it made $1 billion, so you're welcome, Pixar. I'm probably the audience that Inside Out 2 was aimed at. A young adult who grew up loving animated movies, like Pixar movies, and is now an adult and feeling really nostalgic for that time in my life. I guess nostalgia, I guess the emotion nostalgia drove me to see this movie. But also, like I said, the movie's really deep, it's really emotional, and it's really funny, and it's got bright colors, and, Inside Out 2, it's like, it's almost like an hour and a half of escapism. It's a great movie to just watch and kind of forget about the real world for a little bit. There are high stakes in it, but the high stakes are really more internal, literally internal stakes. The external stakes are, Riley's at hockey camp. Like externally, now on the surface that doesn't seem like huge stakes. That seems it's basically a sports movie. It's a fun little sports movie made by Disney, on the surface at least. But inside, literally inside, it's a very personal struggle. It's a personal it's about finding your sense of self. And I think that's very relatable to audiences today. A lot of people right now, are searching for a sense of self. And, they want movies that reflect that. Now, the highest grossing movie of last year was Barbie. And that also made $1 billion. And what was that movie about? Yeah, it was about a plastic doll. Yes, at least on the surface, but if you look at the internal stakes, what is the movie really about? The movie is about a woman growing up, losing her sense of self, processing the world changing around her, feeling like she isn't good enough, and then in the end, learning to love herself as she is, flaws and all. That's very similar to Inside Out 2. I think that's very interesting that Barbie and Inside Out 2 are both about a woman or a girl, a female, having these doubts about herself, feeling like she's not good enough, and it's connecting with audiences of all different backgrounds. And it's interesting because even though both of these movies are female-led films, Barbie, I would argue, leans way more into the themes of feminism. Like Inside Out 2, I wouldn't say the themes are about feminism per se. The theme is really more puberty. But here's the genius of it. Even though Barbie and Inside Out 2 have a female lead and they are about female problems, they're told in a way where it feels relatable to everyone. Like, it feels like everybody can get something out of it. Everybody can find something to connect with. Like Barbie, like when you hear Barbie crying that she's not good enough or she's not pretty enough, like, as a woman, every woman can relate to that, but you know, even some guys can relate to that. Like, you had Ken's storyline, Ken trying to figure out who he is, having insecurities about his manliness, like that was something men could relate to. And Inside Out 2, again, even though Riley's a teenage girl, and I'm not a teenage girl, obviously, I'm a late 20-year-old man, I still found myself relating to her because I remember what it was like going through puberty, and I know what it's like to struggle with anxiety. I've struggled with anxiety most of my life. I still struggle with anxiety. So, and seeing the way anxiety messes with Riley's head, like, it really felt like the movie was going into my head and telling me this is what's happening inside your head. And, just like the first Inside Out, Inside Out 2 doesn't say anxiety's bad. Like, I like how Inside Out 2 doesn't make anxiety the villain. It makes her an antagonist. There's a difference, A villain is someone like Thanos or Darth Vader, where they do really evil, horrific things that tie into the story, and the protagonist has to stop them. The antagonist is not necessarily someone who's evil, but someone who is trying to stop the protagonist from achieving their goal, right? Joy, obviously, is the protagonist in this movie. Her goal is to make Riley happy, just like in the first movie. Anxiety's goal is to make Riley successful, fit in. Like, I think anxiety also wants Riley to be happy. It's just anxiety and joy have different philosophies of how to make her happy. But yeah, like I said, I like how the movie doesn't treat anxiety like a villain. I like that it treats her like an antagonist, like a character. Again, I won't give too much away, but I mean, should I really worry about not giving spoilers? I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen it by now, but you get my point that if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, that the movie, seems to have joy and anxiety come to an understanding of some kind. And, that's a message I think a lot of us need to hear. And it's very similar to how in the first Inside Out, Joy was also the protagonist, but some might argue the antagonist. And in the first movie, it was about Joy's conflict with sadness. Riley was moving to a different state. She was meeting new people, having a totally different environment. And Joy was just trying to keep Riley happy. Like, she was trying to have Riley put on a happy face for her parents' sake. But sadness just couldn't resist messing with her memories and with her control panel. And like, that whole movie was about joy and sadness learning to work together. First of all, to get back to headquarters and bring back Riley's core memories, but also it was about Joy learning that, sadness is just as important as joy. It's very similar to Toy Story in a way. And like, Joy learns in Inside Out that you can't have joy without some sadness. Just like how you can't have light without some darkness. You can't appreciate spring unless you've gone through winter. Like, that's what that whole movie was about. And it was fascinating. And I said in my original review of Inside Out 2 that I thought sadness was kind of sidelined in Inside Out 2. But after seeing it again, I regret saying that so much because, well, yeah, sadness, I would say, is not technically at the forefront like she was in the first movie, she's not sidelined at all. Like, sadness also does play an important role in the movie. Now, for those of you who have seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. Like, when joy, fear, anger, and disgust and sadness are about to go on the stream of consciousness, sadness tells joy, one of us has to be back at headquarters to bring the rest of you back. And so joy sends sadness to headquarters. And even though anxiety is at the control panel, along with boredom, ennui, and embarrassment, sadness is literally in the back of headquarters. And watching the movie, it made me realize that is a brilliant metaphor right there, because it shows that as a teenager, you may try to hide sadness, but it's not that easy. Sadness is still noticeable. Like, sadness is in the back of your mind. And I love how sadness and embarrassment were kind of working together behind anxiety's back. Like, it shows that sadness and embarrassment go hand in hand. And embarrassment is also an important emotion because it can prevent us from making terrible choices, just like sadness. Like, sadness did that in the first Inside Out. She's the one who convinced Riley to not run away. And in this movie, she tries to convince Riley to not make another terrible decision. But of course, anxiety wins in that scene. Again, I won't go too much into spoilers because I want you to see this movie. It is so good. But that's my point, is that I like how the Inside Out movies are basically about how there's no such thing as a bad emotion. Like, all emotions are valid. And that's very similar to Barbie last year. How Barbie was about the idea that you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be what you're supposed to be. You don't have to be what society tells you to be. It's okay to be broken. It's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to be flawed. And in 2022, the highest grossing movie was Top Gun Maverick. Now, yes, that was a male-led movie. It was a very macho movie. It was Tom Cruise as Maverick. It was, the Air Force, the Navy, military propaganda, very patriotic. But that movie was also kind of about self-esteem. That movie was also about a guy trying to remember who he was and trying to regain his confidence. Like, Top Gun Maverick, first of all, he's grieving over the loss of his best friend Goose, and his other best friend, Iceman, is having this terrible illness that's taking his life, and he just sees the world around him changing, and he feels like deep down, he feels like maybe he doesn't belong in this world anymore. And the movie is about him regaining his confidence, making new friends, and having new experiences, and passing on what he learned to the next generation. So, Top Gun Maverick, Barbie, and Inside Out 2, 3 movies that top the box office. All 3 movies, what they have in common is they're about people rediscovering themselves, going to the core of who they are, and learning to love themselves and embrace themselves, flaws and all. And I think that is really a testament to what is happening in our culture right now. Like, people right now are feeling very insecure, unsure about the future. And I think if I were Disney, if I were Pixar, I would really focus on making more movies that touch on that. Because, a few weeks ago, Pete Docter, the head of Pixar, said in an interview that Pixar was considering stepping away from making personal movies, and we're going to focus more on making crowd-pleasing movies, or, movies that are universal or whatever. And a lot of people thought he was talking about, first of all, sequels, but also making movies more bland and inoffensive. Like, people thought Pixar's gonna start making movies like the Illumination movies, like the Despicable Me movies. Now, first of all, nothing against Illumination. I love their movies too, but Illumination, like, their movies, like, nobody goes to a Minion movie to have their lives changed, right? Like, nobody goes to a Despicable Me movie because it's gonna pull at their heartstrings or give them existential thoughts or, bring, like, people go to Despicable Me movies to laugh. People go to Illumination movies to be entertained. Like, Illumination movies, they're not trying to challenge you. They're not trying to change your world. They're just trying to make you laugh and pass the time. And it's clearly working for them because their movies are huge box office hits. I mean, last year, the Super Mario Brothers movie made $1 billion. And, the Minions Rise of Gru a couple of years ago made almost $1 billion. And I'm very confident Despicable Me 4 is going to do the same. I mean, I haven't seen it yet. I plan to see it today, but I'm very confident Despicable Me 4 is going to be huge. So, a lot of people were afraid Pixar was going to start making movies like that. And I'm hoping that with Inside Out 2's box office, that Pete Docter and Pixar and Disney, I hope they're looking at these numbers and seeing that, no, audiences still want personal films. Like, Inside Out 2, yes, it had an amazing opening weekend because of people's nostalgia, see what I did there, for the first movie, obviously. But the opening weekend depends on how good the marketing was and how much people trust the brand. The continuing weeks depend on word of mouth. Now, obviously, Inside Out 2 had an amazing box office because of people's nostalgia for the first movie, but the fact that it's still number one at the box office, as I'm recording this, for 3 weeks in a row, and has already made $1 billion, and is still in over 4,000 theaters nationwide, that should tell you that audiences love personal films. Audiences want to feel things. They still want movies that are made from a personal place. Because Inside Out, the first movie, was actually made by Pete Docter based on the relationship between him and his daughter. It was about his daughter going through changes, trying to process her feelings. And ironically, that's also what Finding Nemo was about. It was about Andrew Stanton's personal relationship with his son. And also The Incredibles was about Brad Bird's relationship with his family. Like, Pixar is at its best when it allows its filmmakers to tap into their own personal journey. And that's what Elemental was. It was about, the director and his family immigrating from North Korea to America. Like, there's a lot of immigration themes in that movie. So I'm hoping that Pixar sees the continued success of Inside Out 2, sees that people are still going out to see it and are telling their friends and family to go see it. I hope they see this and realize people still want personal movies. And if you don't believe me, look at Lightyear. That was a spinoff. That was also a spinoff of a nostalgic property, Toy Story, which is arguably Pixar's biggest franchise ever. It is their cash cow. But Lightyear bombed because, again, it didn't have Tim Allen as Buzz. And also, it just didn't look all that appealing. It didn't even look like a real Buzz Lightyear movie. Like I said, they made Zurg into older Buzz. Like, what the hell? But yeah, Lightyear, that was a movie that didn't really feel personal. Like, that movie really felt like it was made by a studio, by a committee, based on market research. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe the people who made it really did feel passionate about it. Maybe it did come from a personal place. I don't know. And I know a lot of people worked hard on it. I'm not trying to diminish what they went through. Obviously, even the worst movies ever made have effort put into them. But my point is that Lightyear, it just didn't feel personal. Like, obviously, it bombed on opening weekend because nobody was interested in seeing a Buzz Lightyear movie without Tim Allen. It's like seeing a Han Solo movie without Harrison Ford, and we all know how that turned out at the box office. But it kept bombing in the weeks afterwards because Top Gun Maverick, a movie that was very personal, felt very emotional, very intimate, was doing gangbusters at the box office. Lightyear, even the people who saw it were like, that was okay. Whatever. And they didn't tell their friends to go see it. They didn't tell. It wasn't a go see this movie. You gotta go see this movie, because it just didn't connect with people. And heck, look at Elemental again, one of the worst Pixar opening weekends ever, and yet in the preceding weeks it did really well because people went back to it and people told their friends to go see it because it did find an audience and connect with it because it was a very personal story. It was director Peter Sohn and his own story about his family immigrating from North Korea to America. It was a very personal story, and yet it connected to people because it did have universal themes. Movies in the past have always been good at connecting with people, not just kids, not just parents, but also adults, even adults who don't have kids, because their films, like, even though they were personal, they were also universal. They tapped into something all of us feel. And I'm hoping with Inside Out 2's success, I hope Pixar, even if they make sequels, even if they're gonna make sequels, like, yeah, they're gonna make a Toy Story 5, they're gonna make an Incredibles 3. I'm hoping that even with their sequels, they look at Inside Out 2 and still try to make them personal, still try to make them feel universal, make them about characters, make them about themes, make them about what is something we can all relate to, and I'm hoping that is what Pixar takes from this. So, yeah, I am so happy Inside Out 2 is doing well. It is an absolutely fantastic film, and I'm hoping Disney and Pixar take the right lessons from it. So the question is, what do you think? What do you hope Disney and Pixar takes from Inside Out 2? Did you see Inside Out 2? What did you think about it? And, or if you haven't seen it, do you plan on seeing it? Which I hope you do. Comment below, let me know. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this channel with everyone you know. Until next time, I'm Lowell, and see you at the movies.
Let's watch a movie. Let's watch a movie. Absolutely.